the UK has agreed to return the Chagos Islands, Britain's last African colony, to Mauritius, ending a decades-long sovereignty dispute. Britain will keep control of a key military base on the islands, but Chagossians fear that the agreement could end their dream of returning home. So, who is really benefiting from this deal? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Robin Dwyer. The UK's deal to hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius looks like a win for decolonisation. But Chagossians are unhappy about being left out of negotiations. So, has justice really been delivered in this case?
Two brave Chagosian women brought an 11th hour legal challenge to try and stop the UK from handing over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Beatrice Pomp and Bernadette Dugas are fighting to return to their place of birth as British citizens after being forcibly removed from the island by the UK as children.
They are not treating us that we are human beings, we have rights. We are British citizens, yet our right doesn't count. We don't want to hand over our rights to Mauritius. We're not Mauritians.
But the women's legal challenge failed, and the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer signed the deal, saying it's in the UK's national interest.
This is absolutely vital for our defence and intelligence, and therefore for the safety and security of the British people.
The Chagos Islands lie in the central Indian Ocean, south of the Maldives, southeast of the Seychelles, and northeast of Mauritius. The biggest of these islands is Diego Garcia, which hosts a key US-UK military base. It was used during the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, and more recently US airstrikes on Yemen. In the new deal, the UK will retain control of the base in exchange for £100 million a year under a 99-year lease. The military base was the reason the UK severed the Chagos Islands from Mauritius in 1965. Forcibly displacing 2,000 Chagosians in the process. In 2019, the International Court of Justice ruled the UK must end its administration of the Chagos Islands to complete Mauritius's decolonisation. Mauritian Prime Minister Naveed Ramgoolam has said the deal is a great victory for the Mauritian people. But how beneficial is it to the UK, and did it really need to be handed back?
So let's meet our guests. And in the studio, we have Jean-Francois Nellan. He's from Chagosian Voices, an advocacy community group. And also here with us is Elisabeth Braw, who's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. And joining us from Washington, D.C. is David de Roches, former official in the US Department of Defense. And in Lancaster, in England, we have James Summers, who's director of the Centre for International Law and Human Rights at Lancaster University. Great to have you all with us. Delighted you can join the conversation. And I want to start with you, Jean-Francois, because a deal has finally been made on what is a very long-running dispute. The deal has come in from criticism from many places, not least people from the Chagos Islands. So what's your reaction to this deal?
Well, this is an appalling deal for the community, even for the British public as well. The deal itself, there's nothing for the Chagosian. It does not respect the human right of the Chagosian. And it did happen back in the 1960s for the forcibly removed from the island under the Labour government, which was one of the worst crimes in the 20th century. But that's been carried on again by the Labour government dealing with Mauritius without a say from the Chagosian community.
So you feel excluded from the discussions?
I don't think the government had the Chagosian at heart. Neither the UK or the British government have a plan for the Chagosian. They are not speaking to the Chagosian, keep ignoring the Chagosian community.
So what would you have liked to have happened in the run-up to this deal being announced?
Well, we have written to the government so many times, asking them to get the Chagosian to be involved and speak to the Chagosian about the future of the island, the future of the human right. But that's keep being ignored. We are asking them to make sure that human right is aligned with the international law. That's what we're asking. Give us this right. The people from Falkland have a right to decide the future. The people from Gibraltar have the right to decide. Why Chagosian can't have the same right to decide of the future?
Well, I want to turn to you, James. When it comes to international law, the UK might say here that actually they had international law in mind when they made this deal. Do they have a point?
Well, the deal itself follows from a decision made by the International Court of Justice in 2019, in which it found that Britain's possession of the Chagos Islands and the fact that Britain's possession of the islands involves separating them from Mauritius. So just to give a little bit of background, the Mauritius was a British colony, and as independence approached for it in the 1960s, the British government, the Labour government, had meetings with the Mauritian government, and the basic problem was that they applied pressure on the Mauritian government, and they said essentially, if you want independence quickly, easily, the easy way, if you like, then you need to separate out these islands, which we will then use for an American military base. If you resist, then we will make things difficult for you. So this sort of deal was made at the time Mauritius was sort of moving towards independence. And in 1965, the islands were separated out. Mauritius then became independent in 1967. And in the 2019 decision, the International Court of Justice in The Hague said that this effort to separate out the islands violated international law, specifically the right of Mauritius to self-determination, which is to decide their own political future. The approach taken by the United Nations has been that when colonies become independent, they should become independent as one piece of territory. So you can't separate off bits of territory. So this is what the court found had violated international law. Now, the decision itself was an advisory opinion to the United Nations. So it wasn't a real, if you like, a proper case, if you like. There was no judgment. It's not binding. It was essentially advice to the United Nations. But the United Kingdom has decided that it doesn't want to ignore that decision. And it's concluded this agreement essentially to respect what the court decided in 2019.
So, Elisabeth, an advisory decision. Is there something in the timing of why this has now gone through under this current government in the UK?
So this government has continued work that was done by the previous governments, but this is very much in line with the times. So the Western world is trying to finally resolve the remaining issues linked to colonies, and this was one of the remaining issues, and so there was always going to be debate around, is this a good deal, is this a bad deal, whatever deal had been struck. I think the deal was inevitable. Any deal was inevitable simply because it is a leftover of a bygone era, and what matters is also that a number of former colonies have gained confidence and have become more vocal in asserting their rights, and not just because they have been independent countries for some time now, but also because their economies are growing. A number of former colonies are now extremely or highly successful economies. So this was always going to happen in some form or another. And then, of course, now we are at the point where we debate, is this a good deal or a bad deal? But if it hadn't come now, it would have come very soon.
So, David, the United States involved in that they are getting their air base on Diego Garcia. They are going to carry on leasing that from the UK under this deal. Does this look like a good deal for the US, do you think?
I think it's an acceptable deal. I don't think it's a good deal. When we look at how we bases such as this, I think the closest analogy is our missile testing range at Kwajalein, which also, is now part of the Marshall Islands, but we're on a long-term lease. And it's also an atoll. It was also, the inhabitants were vacated. A number of them work on the base on a daily basis, but live on an adjacent island. I think, though, that the problem here is that with a transfer of sovereignty from the United Kingdom to the Mauritius, first off, the character of the Mauritius government going forward is not as reliable as the United Kingdom, so that gives me pause. And then secondly, let's not kid ourselves, Jean-Francois is right. The interests of the Chagosians were not considered at all. They were basically transferred from being British subjects, willing or unwilling, to Mauritian subjects, which I think is almost universally unwilling. And their voice, now that they are ruled over by Mauritians, will not be heard in any global forum the way it would be if they were, if they still had a seat at the table, no matter how small it was, somewhere in London.
Jean-Francois, I want to come back to you. We're talking about this in somewhat theoretical terms, but your grandparents lived on the Chagos Islands. What happened at the time in which they were forced to leave?
Yeah, that's correct. My grandparent was born on the island as my great-grandparent. My nan went on to one of the heritage visits previously, and she told me she was looking at the grave of her grandparent. So I'm talking from third of generation living on the island. That's like 150 years. But we're talking about the law. Like we know it was an advisory opinion. But Judge Gaja, into the separate opinion, has said the Chagosian has not been consulted. And he also mentioned that the case can be revisited by the UN and take into account the Chagosian wish. And for somehow, they're all ignoring that bit from that advisory opinion. And we are asking, revisit the case, take into account the Chagosian wish.
And you actually went back yourself, didn't you? I think it was 5 years ago, am I right? What was it like to set foot there?
I did. I went in February 2020, just before lockdown. It was great. Like every time when I grew up, over the weekend, the family gathered, and my nan or even my granddad always tell their story. And it was true what they were saying. And I didn't want to leave the island when we were meant to be coming back to the UK. It's a shame. I even applied for a job over there so I can go and live on the island. Unfortunately, Chagosian is not giving the opportunity to work as well. Besides, when the treaty was signed with Mauritius, and the Mauritian government has said the Mauritian will have priority. It was said loud and clear on the local media. So Chagosian being ignored, they don't have Chagosian at heart.
So give us an idea, if you will, of how many people now live there, the kind of scale of it.
The community itself is around 10,000 of Chagosian. Majority live in the UK. It's about 3,000 in Crawley, a couple of thousand in Manchester, and a couple of hundred in Derby. But there are Chagosian live in France, Switzerland. Majority has left Mauritius. And you can count how many Chagosian are there in Mauritius.
And what about there on the islands now? Is anybody there now?
There's no Chagosian on the island at all. There are 3 or 4 Mauritian working as contractor, but no Chagosian.
Well, when you talk about the people, it really brings it home, because the discussion is often about the strategic importance, isn't it? And David, I wonder if you could talk to us about the strategic importance of that for the United States, because the airbase is used for striking Yemen, for example, and potentially future operations must have been a factor in this.
Yeah, so it's a critical facility for us. Basically, it's equidistant from Australia, Indonesia, and the critical sea passages there in the Indonesian archipelago, the Persian Gulf, and the east coast of Africa. So it's in the past we used to have a brigade of armored vehicles afloat there. We've stopped doing that, but that's something we could do. So it can be used as a staging area for reinforcements. It's also used for support of humanitarian events, because if there's a cyclone, and we've reacted to cyclones and flooding in places like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, East Africa. It's a refueling stop on the way, which allows cargo aircraft to carry more relief supplies or warplanes to carry more munitions than would otherwise be possible. It's also important as a monitoring facility in the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, which, you know, people forget, but about 50% of the world's commerce transits the Indian Ocean on a daily basis. So without that, we wouldn't have any fixed facility between the Persian Gulf and Australia.
So functionally important, and also, Elisabeth, strategically important because of where it is and perhaps who Mauritius's friends are.
Indeed, and we are seeing the world refashion itself practically on a daily basis, with every country becoming almost like a chess piece in the intensifying competition between what we used to call the West. I'm not sure the West is that united at the moment, but anyway, some sort of Western collection of countries, and then China on the other hand. And it's almost down to Cold War competition. I think those of us who were alive then remember how important every single country in sub-Saharan Africa was. And now we're back to that with even more countries up for grabs, as it were, in this competition. And whether they are strategically located or not, they are important because every alliance or grouping wants as many friends as possible. But of course, the strategically located ones are the crown jewels, as it were, in this game. And we should also remember that there are a number of islands that are located where the good Lord put them, in strategic locations, including Greenland, which is why it is the other big geopolitical issue of the day.
So it is about making friends, as Elisabeth says there, James, perhaps, on the geopolitical stage. Does this win the UK any friends? Does it make it look good to the international community, abiding by this international law advisory?
Well, one of the obstacles that Britain had after this opinion came out is that you have the conflict in Ukraine starting, and Britain is, you know, trying to drum up support against Russia's occupation of Ukraine. And of course, what it gets from many countries in the Africa-Asia region is, well, you're occupying a part of Mauritius, and you're telling us that it's wrong for Russia to occupy a piece of Ukraine. So in terms of sort of presentation, it's very bad for Britain, and it opens it up to charges of hypocrisy, especially when it's trying to build international support against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So in that sense, it helps, I suppose, reset relations in that particular area. So you've moved from a position where you have essentially a detached colony to a situation where the airbase is now being managed in cooperation with Mauritius. Mauritius is getting benefits from this, is getting a large amount of money every year. In the first year, £165 million. It's also getting advantages in terms of priority for employment of Mauritian nationals on the base. So it is getting a number of advantages from this arrangement. And the hope, presumably, is that because this is an advantageous relationship for Mauritius, that this lease is not open-ended. You have 99 years. You then have a sort of possibility of extension for a further 40 years. But if you can create this sort of working relationship, then perhaps this is something that can continue into the future. But of course, it does shove this issue into the long term. This is an issue for sort of the next century now. But as you might know from sort of Hong Kong, 99-year leases do come to an end, and the situation can change very much for the people involved.
David, what do you think? Does this deal potentially raise issues with a global security?
Yeah, I think that there's a possibility that a critical capability for projection, logistics, more so than power projection, could be compromised, could be nullified. And let's not fool ourselves. I mean, what we've basically done, I mean, there's a reason why it was an advisory opinion. Some countries that emerged from colonies were disastrous. Sudan, which eventually had a split into South Sudan. You think of the Biafran War and Nigeria independent, where you have a northern military elite that has historically ruled over, extracted oil from the south, polluted it. So there's a reason why it's an advisory opinion. The Chagossians have basically gone from a rather concerned British overseers that have a substantial degree of colonial guilt to Mauritian overseers who do not share in that guilt and probably have no concern for their interests. And that's not a long-term recipe for stability. So it's not a major concern, but it's a concern. And I think that the United States' interests, just addressing the narrow interests, are probably less secure than they were before.
Jean-Francois, is that an accurate assessment of what many Chagossians feel, that they've perhaps swapped one overseer for another?
We have said like what they are doing. They are passing their responsibility to another country. It's like from one colonial to another colonial power, well, mini-colonial. But like James was saying, they think they are trying to resolve that issues now, but that issue is going to come back in the future. We, Chagossian, we have been fighting for the last 60 years. We won't stop until we got justice. And I'm sure like in 99 years, there will be other generation from Chagossian will carry on fighting.
So what does justice look like for the community?
Well, at the minute, there's no justice. They are not recognized Chagossian as a people. The High Court in 2001 said that Chagossian are the belongers of the Chagos, and they keep ignoring this. And what the Chagossian is asking, they are hoping the next political who will win the 2029 election to rip that treaty apart. And because the treaty it's nothing for Chagossian, it's nothing for the British economy, it's nothing for the British public.
So where do you go from here? Where does your community go from here?
We're still exploring if there's any legal route we can take, and we will carry on lobbying MPs. We got 21 days before they put into Parliament, and we will carry on making our voice heard until they take some action, until they give Chagossian justice.
And Elisabeth, you mentioned, Jean-Francois mentioned that actually perhaps people from the Falkland Islands might be watching this very closely. Do you think a situation like this could expand? Other communities could be thinking, hang on a minute, we haven't been done fairly by?
Well, what we have seen is much more attention being paid to the opinions of locals. In the Falklands, it's clearly the case that they want to remain part of the UK. But, for example, when it comes to Greenland, now there is extreme international focus on what the Greenlanders want, and they are making it known themselves in very clear terms what they want. And, in fact, they have said they want to belong to Denmark, but they are also open to international investment. That's how they want to shape the future of their island. And it's interesting, is it not, that a small, I should say, not a small island, but an island or a location with not a particularly large population can become so important, but it's completely due to its placement on the globe. And so we have these key locations inhabited by not very many people that I think will continue to dominate the headlines, because, as you said, Chagossians are not going to sit idly by and let this happen. And so we'll probably keep hearing more, even now that this deal has been negotiated, and Greenland will stay in the news for sure too.
James, the UK government presumably thinking this helps draw a line under their colonial past as the last African colony that's being handed back. Is this all about trying to move on from that, a PR exercise, if you like?
I mean, I think to a certain extent it is. Of course, the phrase "Africa's last colony," which was applied, I think has been applied very effectively to Chagos, is slightly misleading, because it overlooks Western Sahara, which actually the International Court delivered another advisory opinion in which they said actually Western Sahara should be independent. Morocco then invaded it, ignoring that opinion, and still remains and still claims that Western Sahara is part of Morocco to this day, a position that a number of states, such as the United States, actually accept.
Jean-Francois, I want to give the last word to you. You represent your community. Clearly, not everybody wants exactly the same thing, but personally, what would you like to see? What would you see in your future and the future for the Chagos Islands?
Well, we live in a democratic world. Give the people the chance to decide. I say we want a referendum. Ask them if they want to be under British protection. If they say they want to be under Mauritian, we respect it, but let them decide. I don't think that should be decided by Mauritius or even in London. Give the people their right to decide for the future.
Jean-Francois, Nellan, Elisabeth Braw, Dr. James Summers and David Roches, delighted to have you on the programme. Thank you so much for joining us here on Roundtable. And that's it from this edition of Roundtable, but do remember that you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me and all the team here, it's goodbye and thank you for watching.